They say that milestones are worth celebrating. Your first steps, your first words, your first classroom filled with bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kids. And then there are the firsts that hurt you. Your first experience with fear, with doubt, with shame and hate. They are what make up the building blocks of life. But now this was the first of many firsts to follow. School graduation from one of the most prestigious academies in Musatafu. And your hands were sweaty.
Hey, we're going to be fine,
assured a whisper beside you, finding that smile on Midoriya's face.
Yeah, of course. We'll be fine.
You agreed, chuckling nervously, hoping that alone assured your anxiousness.
You could give Bakugo a run for his money,
whispered Kaminari beside you with a grin.
Not funny.
I mean, come on. You're sweating bullets, and we haven't been called to the stage.
You pouted at Kaminari while you clenched your fists, keeping track with every breath you took. It was a simple walk, shaking hands, accepting your paper, then off you went. Classes have been practicing and rehearsing days before, and yet you felt the nerves brew in your gut. The words that echoed from the microphone became a drone and a buzz in your head, paying more attention to the voices that crept in instead. The panicked thoughts of your classmates around you from every cause. It was loud, cacophonous until you honed your mind to somewhere familiar when the applause rippled through the seats.
We'll be fine,
uttered a calm voice, your eyes turning towards him. You only wished you shared this with one other person who sat down the aisle in the graduating hall. Searching amongst the chairs, you eyed a mop of purple hair, his tired eyes staring back at yours through the applause. You swore you saw a smirk on his face through the crowd before your class was called to attention. You felt proud to stand alongside Hitoshi Shinsou, a fellow classmate of Class 3A, while each of you turned to make the trek to the stage, ready for the world. The ceremony took longer than many of the students expected, almost 3 hours at best, while you made your way to Heights Alliance. Walking through the school and watching the younger freshmen go about their day reminded you of your growth, learning to hone your quirk and become not only a better hero, but a better person. Despite Aizawa's strict regimen, some of the time, you thanked him inwardly for being not only your homeroom teacher, but a role model and someone to aspire to. Still, graduation was a coming of age. You wondered if you deserved it. There had been some thoughts about your acceptance into the hero course, how you got through by the skin of your teeth, and then your conversations with Shinsou growing with him during the years here at UA. Although he earned his right to be in the hero course, let alone in 3A, there was always that conversation about how either of your quirks would help society, especially after what had happened in the war that felt like a lifetime ago. A sad smile pulled at your lips with the thought weighing heavily. You had put in some applications for agencies, but still considered your fit into their agendas. After all, who needed a mind reader?
Well, if it isn't the run of Class 3A,
called a brutish voice from afar. You eyed the student, not recognizing him until you spotted the buttons on his shoulder.
Hey, we're talking to you!
Called out another next to him. With a quick glance of your eye, you discovered they were general studies students, but not ones you recognized from Shinsou's former class. Perhaps they were from other classes, you thought, while you quickened your pace. You cursed yourself inwardly about walking alone to Heights Alliance, even though it wasn't too far from the major school grounds. You kicked yourself harder, wondering why you declined an invitation by your classmates to hang around the auditorium. You had thought getting to your dorm earlier would help your nerves for tonight. Otherwise, your nerves were just nerves. You couldn't help feeling that unnerving feeling that crawled on your back, knowing those students decided to track behind you. Until...
This is too easy. So much for being a smart hero.
It wasn't the first time you've heard insults before. You grew up with that kind of treatment, and only felt acceptance here at this academy. Some of the time, at least. You wondered why you made a turn away from Heights Alliance and decided to round the school grounds instead. What did they want? You only continued to walk through the school grounds until, by happenstance, you found yourself on the PE grounds, empty of people. You shook your head knowing that was a mistake to leave populated areas. However, making your tracks back to the auditorium might yield better results should you find your classmates. But no one was in sight. Your eyes darted around, having walked under the bleachers before you decided to turn, coming face to face with both students, their tall frames towering over you before they trapped you within their arms, leaning against the metallic skeleton of the bleachers.
Hey, congratulations.
One cooed with a grin, his arm trapping you from escape.
Never thought someone like you would survive.
Not a word. Not one word. You thought. Eyes on them. Only on them.
No, wait. You can hear our thoughts.
He commented, his head hovering over yours while you kept your eye on him.
Wanna know mine?
It was hard to ignore while you continued to rake through your mind, your head only filled with the words he thought. You took a few glances around to still find nobody in sight, your vision soon blocked by their bodies trapping you in the bleachers.
Hey, why don't you pick on someone your own size?
Crowed a familiar voice from behind them.
Shinsou?
You called out, spotting his form between them, backlit by the sun that began its descent in the sky. It caught the students' attention, their eyes turning menacingly towards Shinsou with disdain.
2 against 1 isn't fair.
He continued, eyeing the both of them as if his stare drilled into theirs. Your heart leapt from your chest at the sight, but you heard not a word from the students that cornered you. All they did was stare, before one ordered the other silently to approach Shinsou. You heard their intent loud and clear in your mind, their surface thoughts still hard to ignore before, out of your control, you tried to run. Your arm was grabbed violently, holding you back at the bleachers while you watched the scene unfold, forced to watch the first punch fly into Shinsou's face. It was deathly silent, except for the sound of every bone-crushing fist that connected with Shinsou, and yet he did not fight back. He took the blows, one at a time.
Wait, stop!
You cried, pulling at your arms that held you back.
Oh look, it talks.
Snarked the student that held you hostage, tugging you and gripping his hands tightly on your skin.
Out of everyone here, this guy gets special treatment. Someone with a quirk like his getting into the hero program? What a joke. You two are made for each other.
The punches grew wilder and harder, pummeling into Shinsou's chest and face, and yet he still did not retaliate. He stood his ground, his face pained with every strike before a giant blow winded his gut, forcing him to his knees.
Stop it! Let him go!
You yelled, still pulling at the hands that gripped you tightly.
Aw, come on! I don't think your boyfriend appreciates you shouting like that.
Taunted the student before you while he shook his hands beside him, stretching his fingers from the assault. Shinsou breathed through his teeth, grabbing hold of his gut with a nauseating feeling that traveled in waves through his body. His vision blurred from the pain, staring up at his assailant, this general studies student, a former fellow, if anything.
That all you got?
He taunted, earning another punch.
Hitoshi!
You yelled, the voices growing louder with their laughter and their taunts. It wasn't fair. You had your share of childish behavior. You thought graduation was beyond this, but with every strike to Shinsou, it stung. This wasn't meant to be. Until the voices stopped. A snap echoed in the air before both students were wrapped tightly in bindings, constricted in the cloth that froze them in place. You felt your arms release from their hands before running to Shinsou, leaning to aid him in his now beaten and battered body.
I was having such a good day today,
retorted a cool yet aggravated voice. Especially aggravated. Following the trails of his binding cloth, you found Aizawa standing by the pathways, his eyes glowing red while keeping the other students constricted within his grasp. You pulled Shinsou onto his feet, draping his arm around your shoulder for leverage before you turned to Aizawa, his eyes unmoving while he continued to stare.
Take him to recovery, girl,
he ordered.
Don't mind me.
Without another word, you slowly made your way to the nurse's office, keeping Shinsou on his feet and leaving Aizawa behind.
Ow.
Shinsou sat on one of the few stretchers in the nurse's office, now bandaged after being tended to by a recovery girl. It was still hilarious to see how she worked her magic, seeing that Shinsou was almost pummeled into submission earlier, but with only the bandages to help heal a few smaller injuries, he waited while recovery girl spoke with you by the doors.
Now, dear, he'll be fine.
She reassured with a smile.
Good thing too, or else he'd be hurting like crazy tonight.
You smiled knowing Shinsou was taken care of, but glanced at him, spotting the bandages that covered part of his body while he scratched at a few.
Go easy on him. He should be fine for the celebration, but he'll need to stay here before then,
advised recovery girl before she left you by the door, walking slowly with her cane in hand. You smiled after the pro hero, briefly wondering how much you'd miss her after leaving for pro hero life before you entered the room, stomping towards Shinsou, then punching him in his shoulder.
Oh!
Exclaimed Shinsou, his eyes turning to you confused.
You're an idiot, you know that?
You barked with a cross look.
Funny, coming from the one who calls for a study buddy most nights.
I could have handled that on my own.
Certainly looked like it.
Ugh!
You grumbled in frustration, earning another punch in his shoulder to relieve your anger somehow.
Ow!
He exclaimed again.
I was actually scared.
You explained, angry, relieved, and frightened despite feeling all of these at once.
You tried to help, but look at you.
Yeah, well, no quirks on campus, remember? And Aizawa would have killed the both of us if we did.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You succumbed to that fact, knowingly realizing the folly of actions that transpired, and yet you were relieved that Aizawa let you both go. Although, thinking more on that, it was more so the fact that Shinsou was injured that you were able to leave. The guilt started to build. Tiny, but still significant. It was odd how events could cascade into something so large.
Boyfriend, huh?
What?
You asked.
What?
Replied Shinsou in turn.
Nothing.
You glanced away, realizing you just read his head. That wasn't intentional. You didn't mean to. Nerves. It was nerves.
Thanks.
You slowly spoke, catching Shinsou's ear.
recovery girl said you need to stay here until tonight, so if you want, I could pick up anything you need.
To be honest, I was thinking of not going,
admitted Shinsou, surprising you a little.
Why? You've worked so hard to be here. You deserve a celebration like everyone else.
He shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly, uncaring about the situation before you pouted, punching him again.
Ow! Haven't I been a punching bag long enough?
He exclaimed in surprise.
This isn't like your birthdays.
You retorted, his eyes surprised at your fervent pressure.
You worked your ass off to be here, in the hero program, with us. Sure, you haven't made some close friends, but you are deserving and you've earned everything tonight. I will not accept your apathetic response as worthy enough to warrant an excuse to—
Would you like to come with me?
You stopped, staring at Shinsou with your lips slightly agape. No amount of mind reading expected that.
I was going to ask after the ceremony. Then those idiots started following you.
He explained.
And seeing what's happened now, I didn't want to drag you down.
Silence filled the room while you felt the beat of your heart echo in your ears. You could feel the blood burn inside with a flush of embarrassment. Just what were you doing?
I kissed you once and this shocks you?
Asked Shinsou with a quizzical brow.
You stole that from me!
You retorted, finally snapping you out of your stupor. Shinsou only laughed at your response, earning one from you as well, the giggles echoing in the mostly empty room of empty stretches. An hour or two had passed before you stepped outside, watching the sun still in the sky while you made your way to Class 3A's dorms. Shinsou had graciously given you the key to his dorm to collect his suit, which he explained was actually picked out by Kaminari of all people. You chuckled, wondering how that encounter must have happened while you readied yourself in your formal wear earlier than most on your floor, before heading to the topmost floor for Shinsou's. Quickly taking what he had listed was his outfit, you carried the dress suit on your shoulders while rushing out of the dorms, only to—
Sorry!
Blurted someone by the front doors of your dormitories after knocking into them accidentally.
No, you're good!
You called back, paying no mind to who it was before dashing on the pathways in your dress shoes towards the school grounds. You've never seen the grounds empty of students after the day was done. It was almost eerie in its presence before your steps echoed in the empty halls, reaching the nurse's office in due time. You excitedly entered the doors with a grin, finding Shinsou standing by the windows while he stared at the changing colors of the sky. He turned to find you a little flushed from the light jog, yet he stood with arms crossed, eyeing you from head to toe.
I could have walked,
he commented dryly.
Certainly looks like it.
You teased with a smile, eyeing his bandages.
Alright, enough teasing, kitten.
Shinsou outstretched his hand to receive his suit from you, which you handed happily. He proceeded to unwrap the bandages from his person, removing each piece before he revealed his toned torso. You watched while his thumbs tucked into the rim of his pants, halting before his violet gaze glanced at you quizzically.
Would you mind?
He asked. It took a moment for you to realize.
Oh, sorry!
You whispered before you turned your back on him, your eyes no longer staring at him undressing. You smiled at yourself with the image of Shinsou's torso clear in your mind. Thankfully, there was no bruising, but his build was hard to ignore. All his days training off hours really paid off, especially after taking a beating from earlier today. Shinsou slipped into his dress suit for the graduation prom, still perplexed for such a large outing before his eyes stared at your back. He soaked in the sight of you while you swayed on your shoes every now and then. His time in UA was paved with his stubbornness and his own merit. Yet staring at you, growing with him and sharing your lives with each other also brought a warm smile. He fixed his tie around his collar, ensuring it sat well with the suit before he approached you from behind, guiding his hand upon your shoulder with a gentle squeeze. He stopped to watch you turn to him, taking in the sight even more now that you stood beside him.
Shall we?
He asked with that smile still present. You returned that smile filled with joy before feeling his hand direct you out from the nurse's office and into the evening ahead. The prom was lit with fairy lights, much like the paths that led to Gym Gamma that lined the trees. You smiled at how magical it looked, for lack of a better word. But compared to the events of today, it eased your mind to see your fellow graduating class celebrating the night away. Shinsou was more than happy to sit throughout the prom night, observing and watching everyone across the dance floor while you sat beside him. There hadn't been a label on this friendship you shared, on this growing trust you've built with the former general studies student. Heck, he was right when he mentioned that one kiss he took when you were stuck in a closet. No thanks to Kaminari and Ashido. And then you heard his thoughts. By accident, you were sure, or at least tried to convince yourself when you heard what he thought. Boyfriend? Maybe. His intentions were clear from the start. You evaluated where you stood, glancing at him while he still continued to watch, his head slightly bobbing to the music playing all around.
Let's move in together,
you remarked before you watched his surprised reaction.
What?
He whispered, confused.
That's the goal. Let's find a place and move in together.
I haven't even heard from any agencies yet, and you want to make nesting plans? Aren't we too young?
Humor me,
you interrupted, turning yourself to face him while the lights decorated in dapples along the curve of his cheeks. Shinsou stared into your eyes painted with intention and purpose, waiting for an answer to such a ludicrous question. Out of the blue, no less. He soon turned to you, making himself comfortable while his hands held onto yours, shared between each other's laps.
An apartment, overlooking part of the city with nice windows, so it'll let natural light inside.
He described with some thought.
But not too high,
you added.
Is Toka an outdoor cat?
I found her outside.
Okay, something on the 5th floor?
You continued, still humoring the idea in your mind.
That's gotta be high enough for a view.
Only with an elevator,
added Shinsou with a smirk.
I refuse anything with just flights of stairs.
You chuckled at the mere thought of Shinsou having to run up and down stairs for a 5th floor apartment. Yet in turn it gave him a smirk to see you smile and laugh. He chuckled until pain rippled through his sides, clutching onto his torso while you continued to giggle despite your own concern about his well-being. Closing in on Shinsou only made his eyes glint against the lights of the auditorium, seeing his violets almost glow within the dim dance lights. You stared into their pools as if you could drown in them, in the way he stared back at you.
Is it alright if I called you Hitoshi?
You asked, momentarily catching him unaware of the sudden request.
I thought you'd never ask.
He chuckled, almost sultry while you still stared into his eyes, your noses so close to one another's.
You didn't have a problem earlier when my face was getting smashed in.
Shut up,
you teased with a light smack on his shoulder. He cried a little from the smack, but the pain was short-lived before he closed the gap in between, his lips on yours with a delicate touch.
Thank you, kitten.
he whispered with a smile, his hands clasping on yours gently.
Thank you, Hitoshi.
Life is made up of many firsts, some that would test the age of time. And you hoped to cherish the memories that would also follow after, for as long as your mind would keep them.